My name's Cecily, and today's Bible reading comes from Proverbs chapter 4, verses 20 to 23. My son, pay attention to what I say. Turn your ear to my words. Do not let them out of your sight. Keep them within your heart. For they are life to those who find them, and health to one's whole body. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Hear the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
We're in lockdown again, and I'm conscious of the disruption this has caused to many of us. Even amongst our own church, I know of a few interstate holidays that have had to be cancelled or postponed, a kid's birthday party for this weekend, and even today we were going to have a few lunches, and next Sunday a barbecue. All of these have to be changed. And today we're starting a new preaching series, and we're not able to have the same level of engagement and interaction in our service as I'd hoped. So when the news came through on Thursday afternoon about this lockdown, I was pretty angry. And so in the evening I went out for a run to let go of some of that frustration. And yet as I was running, it occurred to me that this lockdown serves to emphasise even more our need for this preaching series. We're beginning this series on habits, the daily habits of our lives, the ordinary practices that draw us to God and to each other. And not only the habits that connect us to God and to each other, but also the habits that unhook us or help us disengage from the confusion and the chaos that we can all experience. 12 months ago, when I decided to do this series and put it in the calendar, I never imagined we'd still be in lockdown. But it's in the unplanned, unwanted moments of our lives that we need life-giving practices, disciplines, habits that give direction and purpose to our lives. We need some sort of a framework, a structure, a pattern for our lives, for the days and weeks, so that amidst all the other things, we're not overwhelmed. Well, what am I talking about when I say this series is all about our daily or weekly habits? Well, you've probably heard the phrase, "You are what you eat." Dietitians have been using it for many decades. It's often used in relation to nutrition. It's highlighting that a balanced, healthy diet can produce well-being in your life. Because what you eat not only impacts your waistline or your cholesterol, but also your energy, your mood, your concentration, your sleep, and other aspects of health. So dietitians have been saying, "You are what you eat," as a phrase. But even more important than organising what you put into your mouth, your cravings for food, is what you have to shape your heart, your cravings of the heart. That's even more important than what you eat. What are you yearning for? What are you desiring? What are the things you give your time and attention to? What do you emotionally invest in? These are the things that truly shape the people that we are. Yes, food shapes you in more ways than one, but what you truly love, you are what you love. What you love shapes you more than anything. That's why the Christian author Jamie Smith wrote the book, "You Are What You Love," because there is power, spiritual power, in our daily habits. All of our actions, our behaviours, our habits have spiritual value, whether for good or for bad. Whether it be what you watch on TV or on the computer, what you look at or put your time or mind to, what you think about when you wake up, what you dream about or imagine for the future, who you talk to and spend time with, or who you don't talk to, or the time you have by yourself. All of these practices determine the people we become. And if you're a follower of Jesus, you're going to struggle at times to apply your faith in those day-to-day, week-to-week moments. It's a struggle following Jesus because it involves challenging those habits that you've formed, so that those habits actually direct you, not towards perhaps false idols, but actually direct your heart towards love for God and for others, and care for yourself as well. So we want to be intentional by applying our faith in our contemporary and complex world to develop simple practices that draw us close to God and are life-giving, as well as being aware of habits that can unhook us or disconnect us from those things that might overwhelm or draw us away from God. That's what this series is all about. We heard in today's reading from Proverbs 4 the instruction to guard your heart. Above all else, guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of your life. As the source of your life, the heart is not simply the seat of the emotions, although it's at least that, as we see in many a Hollywood film. But the heart is also a lot more than just an organ pumping in your body. The writer of Proverbs had far more in mind than that, of course. The heart also here is more than simply your thoughts, although the Hebrew word for heart does have your thinking in mind. It is included here. When it describes or uses that word heart, it's talking about the operational centre of who you are. It's the absolute core of your identity, the source of your life, we read. Guard your heart, the instruction is, because Christian faith involves transformation, not so much of waistline or cholesterol as dietitians might want, but transformation of the heart, of your love, of your will and desire, of your motivations being transformed by God. It's about becoming worshippers in spirit and truth, not just for an hour or two on Sunday, but Monday through Sunday, every moment, every action. It's about taking all our thoughts captive to Christ and making them obedient to Him, putting our faith into action so we have a faith that works, and allowing God's love to fill and transform our hearts so that it becomes a wellspring of life and love for others. Guard your heart more than anything else. Be intentional about what you desire, what you long for, what you love in the fullest sense of that word. So the dietitian might say you are what you eat. You need the right balance of vitamins and minerals to produce health and well-being. Proverbs here is saying that biblical wisdom, the instructions that's applied in your life, will lead to life and health. Verse 20 and 21 say, "Pay attention to my instructions. Let them penetrate deeply into your heart." Verse 22, "For they are life to those who find them and health to one's body." And then, as we saw, above all else, guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of your life. So what are the habits, the practical actions that this series is going to focus on to help us direct our heart, to guard our heart and have a heart of love for God and others? Well, we could have chosen any habits really, to focus on. But we've chosen 8, which fits nicely into a 9-week series for this term. And we've structured this series on a book called The Common Rule by Justin Ali. And these 8 habits that we'll focus on, starting from next week with the first one, are summarised on this chart that you can see of 4 weekly and 4 daily habits. You'll see 4 weekly habits on the outer circle there on that chart, and 4 daily habits there in the centre. And you can see some of the habits there like conversation with a friend or eating a meal with others. Those habits tend to direct our heart more in our love for others, while other habits, at least in the first place, direct our heart more toward God as we pray, as we read the scriptures, for example. And some of these habits emphasise our embrace of good gifts like Sabbath rest and recreation, enjoying rich conversation with others. While some of these habits that will be talked about have an aspect of resistance to them, such as turning your phone off during the day, for part of the day at least, or having limits on the amount of media that you're consuming and absorbing. And we'll explain these as we work through them over the next 8 weeks. But rather than just focusing on this model, we want to consider the biblical principles behind each of these practices. Because the aim of this series isn't for you to just tick off one after the other, doing these things as if that's the best thing you can possibly do. They might not be relevant or current for you right now, and you need to take into account the current habits that you're already practicing, consciously and unconsciously, of course. So we've modified them, we've broadened them, we've changed the order actually a little bit as well, as we consider the broader biblical principles behind them. And then hopefully you can then take what's helpful for you, adapt them, and try them out for yourself. So from next week we'll start with that habit of prayer, daily prayer, then reading scripture, then the next daily habit of silence and presence, and also eating with others. And then the 4 weekly habits will be conversation with a friend, curating media and stories, fasting and abstinence, and Sabbath. And in each case, we'll explain and unpack them as we go along. Christian writer Mark Buchanan writes, "Most of us stumble into the kingdom with nary a clue how to do this. So we thrash about, make reckless attempts, arm ourselves with slogans, goad ourselves with guilt, fail and fail and fail, and finally settle for spiritual mediocrity. Our inner lives remain cramped and musty. We resort to mere conformity, to a masquerade of piety to cover up for our lack of real Christ-likeness. We want a better way than that way. We want an intentional pattern of habits for following Jesus in our contemporary, ordinary lives. And that's what this series is about having intentional habits to receive God's love and to share God's love in our lives. It involves taking every thought captive, of being obedient, of putting our faith into action in this complex and confusing world. It's about having those habits which will also unhook us from the chaos and confusion that can so easily overwhelm. So that's where we start. That's our introduction. We do all of this not in our own strength, but with effort, but relying on God's grace. resolving to take hold of that for which Christ has taken hold of us, using habits to put ourselves in a position where God will transform our hearts so that we become more like Jesus. So I invite you to reflect on these things, to now move into this song that we're having in our service of Oceans about calling on God amidst the chaos and disorder of our lives, of bringing our hearts to Him. Because above all else, guard your heart, Proverbs says, for it is the wellspring of your life.